means is similar effects probably have similar causes, and then the law of causality: every effect must have an adequate cause, and you take those two together, and that's how we do origin science, whether you're an evolutionist or a creationist. And most evolutionists don't even know that. They think that somehow evolution is proven to the scientific method. Well, nobody's ever observed one species evolving into another species. We don't even have fossils of things with half wings, half arms. I mean, but even if we did, that wouldn't be observation. You'd have to observe something evolving into something
that was
else.
one time I remember one of the atheist sites I frequent. They were all going off on this video, and I clicked on the video, and it was like a video of a fish, and it kind of looked like it had feet, and they were like, oh, and I just put up a question. I was like, how does this? Because it was actually on an atheist website, and I was like, how does this advocate atheism?
Yeah.
And I put that out there. And not a single person responded to me on that, because it's just like, well, it doesn't. It's just like this. You have this anomalous fish that doesn't. It shows no evidence for what they're claiming.
That's like Reggie Findlay when I debated him over internet radio. He brought up that they found. I said, "Well, give me some evidence for evolution." He said, "Well, they found chicken with reptilian teeth." I said, well, I don't know enough to comment on that. Haven't heard anything about that. I'll have to look into it. But I said, seems to me if a chicken's got teeth, it would be chicken teeth. It wouldn't be reptilian teeth. So I don't care what the teeth would look like. How would you make a case that it's reptilian teeth unless you presupposed evolution first, and that reptiles evolved into birds? So whatever the case, there's so many assumptions that are being made, but evolution, just as creation is not being observed, evolution is not being observed. Not evolution from one species to another. So evolution. So when you look at the origin of the universe, the origin of first life, where the genetic information of a single-celled animal is enough to fill 20,000 volumes of encyclopedia, and then the origin of complex life forms, the creation model is far more plausible than the evolution model in each one of those. So science has not disproven God. And they like to use, atheists like to use Occam's razor, where if two explanations explain the data at hand, you accept the simpler of the two. The one that is that doesn't multiply explanations needlessly. Well, they act like Occam's razor says only accept natural explanations, never accept supernatural explanations. Well, Occam, number one, Occam was a monk. He believed in God.
Yeah.
Okay. Number two, the simplest explanation, like in the explanation for the resurrection, for the data, historical data, sometimes the simplest explanation is a supernatural explanation. And I would argue that the atheistic explanation is a non-explanation. It doesn't explain the origin of the universe. It doesn't explain the origin of first life. It doesn't explain the origin of complex life forms. So it's not an adequate explanation.
Well, and one of the things too, J.P. Moreland always pointed out in class. Also, real quick side note, we've mentioned this book before, but Christianity: The Nature of Science, brilliant book by J.P. But one of the things he says too is he says Occam's razor is it's not a metaphysical tool; it's an epistemological tool. And what he meant by that was he's like, reality can be as complex as it has to be.
Yeah.
You don't use Occam's razor to dumb down reality.
Yeah.
And it seems like, in almost a sense, that's what's going on here.
Yeah, and what Occam's razor simply is doing is saying, look, we don't go off on these wild tangents and keep multiplying explanations and complicating things just because you don't like a simpler explanation that explains all the data at hand. And And basically, I would argue that's exactly what evolution is a violation of Occam's razor, where you come up with this incredibly complex explanation. And the fact of the matter is, though, you ask, well, how did evolution occur? And they still can't tell you. They're going to waffle on that. Well, it was in the Expelled movie. You had Michael Roos, I believe, saying that something jumped on the back of a crystal or something. I mean, it sounded like a fairy tale or whatever. And at first he just proposed it, and then he got upset at Ben Stein because Ben Stein didn't accept
kind of
his
laughed at it
proposal.
too.
And but the fact of the matter, see, the atheist is saying of the Christian and the theist, we don't have to believe in the who anymore. That's outdated. The who of creation, because now we know the how. We know how it got here. Okay, well then, so belief in God is obsolete. Okay, well then, how did we get here? Well, evolution. Well, how did evolution occur? Well, some say mutations, but there's problems with that, and others say this. So we really don't know how evolution occurred. Oh, well then you don't know the how. So the who is an obsolete. And I would argue not only for in the area of creation, but in epistemology, our theory of knowledge. Atheists would say, well, now we know how man knows, so we don't have to believe in the who, the logos, who enlightens our minds to know and created us to know. Well, the fact of the matter is there is no agreed upon atheistic epistemology, and so we know as little about how man knows as we do how we got here. If you throw the theistic God out the window,
and I really like it how you mentioned that this atheism, it raises these objections. But then, if you were to embrace it as a worldview, it really answers nothing. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really, like you said, it doesn't really give you an idea of origin of life.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you an idea for any standard of morality, ethics, or even like certain things like the laws of logic.
Yeah, and Peter Singer is really trying to find, if God doesn't invest human life with value, we were created in God's image. You take God out of the picture. Well, the only thing he's got is like the healthiest human beings, and since he's at Princeton and not at Gold's Gym, he defines health more in terms of mental health. And so Stephen Hawking is brilliant, so it's okay that he's in a wheelchair and stuff. But Peter Singer, has reached a point where trying to come up with this atheistic ethic, putting man at the center of the universe, he ends up arguing that the life of a full-grown chimpanzee or pig is worth more than the life of a newborn baby because they have a higher level of consciousness. He argues that severely disabled people, especially when they're mentally handicapped, only have a right to life if mentally healthy people invest their lives with value. And so and he has to keep saying every other page why his views are different from the Nazis. And the reason why he has to say that is his views are so similar to the Nazis, which is why Germany didn't want him speaking there for years. I don't know if he's allowed to speak there anymore. It's why when he gets protested, there's always people in wheelchairs protesting him. And but that's the kind of world without God that we face. And the idea that religion or belief in God poisons everything, wait till you turn the reins over to Peter Singer. And it could get to the point it could get to the point where you just determine anybody who believes in God is insane. And if you go by Peter Singer's way of thinking, if sane people don't want them around, you'd be doing a favor to get rid of them. And that's like Ben Stein's Expelled, Adolf Hitler's exterminating the useless eaters.
Useless eaters, yeah.
They're eating food that could have been eaten by productive members of the master race. Now, Hitchens and Dawkins would disagree with that, and I'm glad they would disagree with that. But how their view is more in line with Darwinian thought than Hitler or Stalin's view. I think Hitler and Stalin more along the lines of survival of the fittest, than their views. And I think natural selection favors the genocidal side of the equation. And I'm glad that Dawkins and Hitchens do have some level of compassion, but that's due more to their Christian upbringing than it is to evolutionary ethics, any ethics derived from evolution.
Well, you bring up this point now, and I think it's a perfect transition. I remember one time in an internet chat session, I referred to Dawkins as militant, and I was slammed for that. How dare you say that? He's not militant. And I said, well, he says that if you teach your children about God, it's child abuse. And they're like, well, how's that militant? I'm like, well, what do we do to child abusers?
Yeah, well,
don't we lock them up? And
yeah.
your 13th chapter
is
addressed this issue.
Yeah, and by militant too, I don't mean that. I don't think Richard Dawkins is ever going to want to punch me, and Hitchens, and I don't think that they want to shoot Christians.
They probably found out you were a boxer. That's why they don't.
But all I'm talking about, they're being militant is more along the lines of just the passion, the hatred for Christianity they have. Now, it does kind of spill over into, if you teach children about God, they call that child abuse. Well, that does imply, everybody wants to see child abusers in prison, so that kind of implies that maybe we need to shut down churches that have Sunday school classes teaching children, Awana programs, Royal Rangers programs. Even the Boy Scouts were supposed to take, part of their teaching was respect for God. But then homeschoolers, do we need to imprison them for child abuse? Christian schools that teach younger children. But the atheists can't have it both ways, because the atheists pride themselves. I listened to Nick Conrad, who promoted my debate with Eddie Tabash. When we went out to eat afterwards, he asked Jeff Lauder, are you raising your children? He has 2 children. Are you raising them to be atheists? He said, no. I asked them if they want to go to church, I'll take them to church, but they don't want to go to church. But I just let them make up their own mind. And Nick Conrad said, that's amazing. I hear that more and more from atheists. They act like they're so tolerant with this and all, but 2 things. Number one, we teach our children more by example than by our words.
Yeah.
So they are teaching their children atheism to a certain degree. But the other thing is that now Lauder and Tabash, I would not classify them as the new atheists. So they're not as big on Christianity being so evil and intolerant and stuff like that. But for the new atheist to say that you shouldn't teach a kid about atheism, look, if religion poisons everything, and religion is incredibly intolerant, and teaching children about religion is child abuse, then it seems to me that atheists should teach their children atheism. I mean, that'd be the only righteous thing to do. So you can't have it both ways. So if you want to, you could tell Christians that they shouldn't teach their kids about Christianity, shouldn't teach their kids about God. But then the atheists, if Christianity is as bad as they say, then they ought to teach the kid the truth and what is true and what is right. They ought to teach them atheism. Now what is my view? My view is that the parents have the say. That's whether it's atheist parents or Christian parents. I feel sorry for the atheist kids, kids of atheists. But I think it's the parents that have the say. It appears to me that Dawkins and Hitchens want to turn the authority over the children to the state. That's got a lot in common with Hitler and Stalin and the way they wanted to run things. But that's really, as bad as that is, as ugly as that is, and B.F. Skinner, Beyond Freedom and Human Dignity, where the intellectual atheistic elite genetically manipulate people and control their environment, and moving towards a brave new world, a totalitarian state. That's the direction these guys are headed. But that's actually not why I call them militant. I just call them militant because this is more of an emotional The new atheists represent more of an emotional tirade